Just here and Howard, is this real?
Yeah.
Do you think that's the last?
Well, first of all, happy hump day. It's great to have you on a hump day on the Randy Karraker Show. Brooke Grimsley. Joe Roderick is in for Matthew Rocchio. Rock headed out to a wedding, not his own, but he's headed out
Maybe
to a wedding.
one day.
Maybe one day.
Maybe he'll propose at the wedding. You know, some people do that where they'll propose at another person's wedding.
That's stealing thunder. That's bad form.
You think so? Even if you get permission from the bride and groom?
Would you have given permission to somebody?
It depends on the person. I think that's a big caveat there. Like if it's a family member and maybe they've been waiting for a while, I would be fine. But I get what you're saying. Like imagine you have your nice reception, which you paid a lot of money for because weddings are not cheap nowadays. And then a proposal happens. That is kind of stealing thunder a little bit.
Are you okay with telling the story about the person that was very well dressed at your wedding when you were walking down the aisle? Are you okay with telling that story?
Yeah, I know. Eventually we will talk about the Cardinals outfield situation, we're and also today, by the way, we're actually bringing back a segment that has been a long time on the radio for you, Uncle Randy. So this kind of fits into if you have any wedding advice that you need today or just advice in general, Uncle Randy, you can put it in your questions throughout the show and we'll answer that coming up a little bit later on.
10:50.
But yeah, so Randy was at my wedding and this girl who was there, I'm friends with her boyfriend, like a longtime friend of mine, and she is stunning. So this is not jealousy in any way. She's absolutely gorgeous. Like, I mean, a model in Miami. And literally, I come down the aisle and she is dressed to the nines. And I came down the aisle, I was like, I'm about to go back, turn around and get a new wedding dress because she is outdoing me at my own wedding. And I wasn't mad about it. I was like, good. Like, dang, girl. I was just like, you are outshining me right now. Even the wedding photographer, I noticed because you get your photos back that you pay for. There was so many photos of her. And not that there was more of her than me, but there was a lot of photos of her. And I was like, I can't hate it. I was just like, I felt like I was being outshined a little bit on my wedding day. Because she is stunning. I can send you, a link to these photos. Because as soon as you see her, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. She is stunning, like drop dead gorgeous.
So Brooke is, this is really what happened. Brooke is walking down the aisle and she sees this woman and she says, hey, this is my wedding.
And she wasn't wearing white or anything. She was just really well dressed and she stood out in a crowd because she is so beautiful. But I was just like, dang, like I thought I was going to be like, the one that's shining on my wedding day. And she's the one who's standing out.
Yeah. So speaking of standing out, we'll talk a little bit about Quinn Matthews. He was really good for the Cardinals yesterday against the Blue Jays. Cardinals and Junkies today in Tampa.
Junkies.
Yeah, and McGreevy gets the start for the Cardinals. But let's start with the outfield because that's what we promoted that we would do. And the outfield, Brooke, I think, just like every other year for like the last decade, will look different on opening day of 26 than it does on opening day of 25. This isn't what the Cardinals outfield is going to be, what their starting outfield is going to be. It's what their ideal outfield ultimately is going to be.
And that's what we're talking about is ideal outfield because we know because Nolan Arenado is here, that kind of changes things a little bit. It changes a lot with the plan with the Cardinals because if Arenado wasn't here, then you could have Corbin at third base, obviously. Then you could have Brendan Donovan at second. But now with Arenado still here, that really changes also things in the outfield, not just all the other positions when we're talking about Gorman getting at bats and also time in the lineup. We're also talking about the outfield. It's interesting because yesterday in that game that we're talking about with Quinn Matthews, Victor Scott II homered and tripled in that game in that 3-2 loss against the Blue Jays. And he's a guy that just continues to impress me every single spring training. Remember last year, he did really well during spring training. You had some injuries emerge, and that's how Victor Scott II kind of got that opportunity in the outfield. When you're looking at your ideal outfield, and I'm just talking about not what's on opening day, not in June, just like what's going to be best defensively for this team, I would think that it would be Victor Scott II as your center fielder, Lars Nootbaar in left, and then Jordan Walker in right. And that means that every single one of those guys is rising to the full potential of what you're expecting.
And Brooke, what have the Cardinals said all off season? We want to find out about our kids.
Yeah.
All due respect to Michael Ciani, who's a terrific defensive center fielder. but I think we've probably seen the best that Siani has to offer at the major league level.
Yeah.
He's never going to be a 90 stolen base guy. Victor Scott II, 2 years ago, was the Gold Glove center fielder in all of minor league baseball. They only give awards to left, center, and right in AA, single A, high A, AA, AAA. They only give one Gold Glove out of all the minor leaguers to each position. And Victor Scott was a center fielder. We know he can play that position at a Gold Glove quality level. We know he can run. We know that he can get on base. If you're the Cardinals, you've already seen what Michael Siani can do. I'm with you. I think you need to find out what Victor Scott II can do as your everyday center fielder, and you ultimately have to find out what Lars Nootbaar can do as an everyday player and hope that he doesn't get hurt. But you need to find out what he can do over the course of 140 games.
Yeah, and the situation, too, that you have with Victor Scott II, there's just something about when we were talking to Ricky Horton the other day about, guys who kind of carry themselves as big leaguers. Victor Scott II is that guy to me, because I don't know if you were able to see in interviews recently that he's talked about during spring training, is that he has really put in a lot of work of studying the game this offseason, which, I mean, that sounds simple, right? All of the guys should be doing that, but actually putting in a lot more work to that. And he said that he got that advice from Willie McGee. You could tell how much he kind of respects the game too. And I think that that's something that stands out to me, is that Victor Scott II, when I've interacted with him, just seeing how he handles himself, he carries himself like a big leaguer. And you mentioned his success in the minors, and we know that this is a really young athletic group. So I want to see more stolen bases this season and in the future, because that kind of gets back to your bread and butter of the Cardinals. I'm thinking of things defensively up the middle, how sound your team is. That I think Victor Scott II does that, but also, just kind of an athletic young team. Why not capitalize and steal some more bases? In 2023 in the minors, he stole 94 bases.
Yeah.
94.
And I don't know if they'll allow him to try that at the major league level, but ultimately when Chaim Bloom takes over, that's the kind of ball that he's going to want the Cardinals to play. That is kind of what they did when they had Carl Crawford in Tampa and some of the other guys that stole bases there. Chaim is going to want the Cardinals to be a more aggressive team, and there's no player probably in the organization that's more fit for playing an aggressive style than Victor Scott II. Now, if you have him at the top of the lineup, then all of a sudden you can hit Win second and have a ton of speed at the top of the lineup, and then you would have to hope that Lars Nootbaar turns into the player you think he's going to be. Then all of a sudden your top three are very athletic.
Yeah.
And then there's so much hope. We're on hopium here because you need Walker to come through. You need Walker to turn into a good player, because next year, you might have Arenado, but he's not an ascending player. You need Walker to ascend, and hopefully Wilson Contreras is going to wind up being the offensive player that he's been so far for the Cardinals. But to answer the outfield question here, for better or worse, you're going to have Walker in right. I think Walker should be playing first, but he's not. Ideally, he'd be playing first. Ideally, if I'm the Cardinals, I've got Nootbaar in left, I've got Scott in center, and I've got Burleson in right.
Yeah. Burleson in right. Okay, so you're saying Walker at first
Walker
then in your
first.
scenario.
Yeah.
That's really interesting, because what do you think about my big worry? I think worst case scenario, sometimes I know that we're talking about being high on hopium, but my concern is about how things look defensively on that right side this season, because you have Wilson Contreras, who's still obviously learning first base, and you have Jordan Walker, who is improving, but he still obviously is growing in right field. That's my concern. Is worst case scenario is that doesn't work out well.
And what if you have Brendan Donovan in left, and Gorman, who even the Cardinals will tell you, hey, we think he can be a league average second baseman. He's not going to be a Gold Glove second baseman. I think Donovan could be a Gold Glove second baseman. He's been a Gold Glove utility guy, been a Gold Glove finalist. I really, truly believe that the Cardinals are much better served by having Brendan Donovan in the middle infield. But to your point, on the right side, if it's Gorman, Contreras, Walker, you just want to hit the ball to the right side against the Cardinals.
And they're professional baseball players. I think everybody obviously knows that. They're going to find a weakness. And it's just defensively, it really concerns me on that right side with Wilson Contreras and with Jordan Walker, both kind of learning still on the fly, especially Wilson. This is completely new for him to be over at first base. And so I just have that fear of what that looks like defensively. And when we're also looking at this outfield situation, I know that Claves mentioned this yesterday about, okay, well, what do you want? Offensively, the best situation, or defensively? I think you have to look at things defensively, because we keep hearing over and over again, the Cardinals kind of have change their outlook on power. Not that they don't want any power. You have to if you want to be successful in any way and win games, especially nowadays in baseball. But we keep hearing over and over again that they're not as worried about that exit velo. They're not as worried about Jordan Walker be like a 20-30 home run guy. It seems like they're not concerned about offense. So you would think that they're looking for the best kind of look defensively in the outfield.
I think they're just going to accept the offense whatever way they get it. You don't become a top 5 prospect in baseball if you don't have offensive ability. And they tried to change the guy. They get him to the majors, and then and we all know the story, right? Trying to change the launch angle and trying to get him to change his approach. And what happens? You change your approach and you get better. And he's a smart guy. We were talking about this before the show. He was accepted to Duke, and athletically, Jordan Walker
he
is
can handle
smart.
the challenge.
He can.
He can.
How do you get better? You get better by playing, by getting reps.
Yeah.
And the Cardinals have not given him enough reps at the major league level, but he hits the ball hard, and ultimately that'll come. Jack Clark was here. Jack Clark wasn't a guy that had the launch angle and didn't hit these majestic home runs. He hit line drives.
Yeah.
And that's what Jordan Walker has the capability of being.
Even Albert Pujols, when you were covering him throughout his entire career, was he trying to be a home run guy?
He said, no, I'm not a home run hitter. And Tony told him before he even started his major league career, he said, you don't need to try to hit home runs. With the way you hit, home runs will come. Matt Holliday wasn't a classic home run hitter, but hit the hell out of the ball and hit it hard and had a lot of doubles and wound up being a great hitter and hit in the clutch. And I'm more than willing to take a look at Jordan Walker for 550, 600 at-bats, and let's see what it looks like at the end of the year. He might have moments where there's going to be adversity. You let him battle through that, and you let him become what he's capable of becoming.
So we have some questions in the chat, and Cronky Hater here says, Arenado being traded would open up the look on the outfield. Sorry, I had a commercial pop up right on my YouTube channel when I was trying to read it right in front of me. But I'm talking about on my side. But I think that's a really good point. And that's what we're talking about is it feels weird. I was telling you before the show, it's not like I'm saying, Arenado, get out of here. I mean, that's not the whole purpose of this. But when you're looking at the youth movement and trying to progress this team forward into that part of what they're saying, the youth movement, I want to see these younger guys get a chance. And it does change things a lot, not just at third base, obviously, where Gorman's not getting all the reps over there at third. It also changes things in the outfield, which is why we're in this position right now.
And I really think that the Cardinals ultimately, I mean, when they're ready to win, Nolan Arenado's not going to be here. And that's another point about not trading him. But yeah, that allows you, if you do that, you don't have Arenado, and we've talked about it a lot. It's Gorman, Wynn, Donovan, Contreras, Newt Barr, the center fielder, Walker, and then you have one of the catchers, and then maybe Burleson and Herrera share a DH spot. It really does change a lot. You're right. Damian Fowler checks in on the YouTube chat. He says, if you're going to go defense, it's got to be Ciani. He would have won a Gold Glove last year if he played enough games. He's excellent defensively.
Yes.
Probably would have. He was right on the edge, right, of playing enough innings. Probably should have. But Victor Scott is outstanding defensively. And here's the thing about Ciani. Last year, he got better as the season went along, and he wound up hitting as the season went along, and he got better. He hit 228 with a 570 OPS. His career minor league numbers, and we think that minor league pitching isn't as good as major league pitching. 243 with a 698 OPS. Now you take a look at Victor Scott, who had the 94 stolen bases, as you mentioned, Brooke, and has great history. Well, not a great history, but a better history of turning in offensive production. Let me get back to, I had it up here and I will get it. This is great podcasting that we're at. Victor Scott. At the minor league level, well, first of all, at the major league level, his career OPS, and that's only last year, is not great because he didn't have a terrific year. It was just 502. But before that, at the minor league level, when you look at what he was able to accomplish, let's just take his last year. Well, I'll give you his career because I gave you Ciani's career. Okay, so let's be fair. In the minor leagues, career 264 batting average, and a 725 OPS. So 27 points higher OPS for Scott than Ciani. 344 career on base at the minor league level for Victor Scott. And I think most notable, the 137 stolen bases with 94 in one season.
Yeah, I think there's a little bit of difference. And I think to your point, you're saying we're talking about the full potential of these players, that full upside. And Victor Scott II has that. Nothing against Ciani. I think Ciani is a great player. But I think that sometimes we've seen that in the past where guys have flashes of the excellence and it's not sustainable.
Right. And here's the play. If you have Ciani on your team, when you get to the seventh inning and you don't want to take a chance on Jordan Walker making an error out there, that's when you bring in, when you reach your peak level, a guy like Ciani. And then you can move people around. You can move Newbar to right, Scott to left, whatever you want to do. Smooth Productions checks in on the YouTube chat. He said, at no point should Donovan play in the outfield. If he is, that means something terrible has gone wrong. Injuries, poor performance. Nato's still on the team. Smooth, I'm pretty much with you there.
I don't disagree.
Yeah.
It's like what we're saying. We're talking about the ideal outfield. I want Larson left, Victor Scott II as your center fielder, and Jordan Walker in right field.
And by the way, in an ideal scenario, which won't happen, but let's talk about ideals.
Because there's always injuries that pop up or something else.
In an ideal scenario for I don't even know if this is ideal, but for the group that's on hand in 2025, they probably would have been better off with Contreras in left, and then whoever wins the center field job, Ciani or Scott, and Lars Nootbaar in right, and Jordan Walker playing first base.
Do you think that they're doing a disservice to Jordan Walker because we need to be able to maximize him? And I feel like he just hasn't been put sometimes in the right situations. We've talked about at length him working through adversity, but then you send him down to the minors. Do you think that they're not exactly doing the best job with Jordan Walker I think that he should be a first baseman too? Are they kind of doing a disservice where he's not getting that opportunity? But with this whole Wilson Contreras contract, it's like they're trying to maybe pacify that situation too.
They have done a disservice to Jordan Walker almost since the day they drafted him. When they took him to Springfield for that camp during COVID, and hopefully he learned something there. But then they rush him through the system. They keep him at third base when he should have been playing the outfield. They knew that he was never going to play third. I'll tell you what, I knew he was never going to play third at the major league level. Why didn't they? They go get Arenado. They've got Gorman. He was never going to play third. There was
never a clear path.
And then Gary LaRocque, the former Cardinals minor league director, said, well, we don't want him to have to think about playing defense in a new position. We just want him to hit. Okay, fine. But then if that's the case, then why did you change the way he hits once you got to the majors? It just didn't make any sense. So he should have been either playing the outfield or first base in the minors. Jordan Walker should have. And we should not be having these talks right now. He was a pretty decent third baseman, but he weighed 220 pounds. He weighs 260 now. And he's too big to play third, but we know he can play the corner infield. So ideally, when we talk about idealism, Walker should be at first base.
I think so too. It's just now everything is so convoluted with what you have going on with this whole Wilson Contreras contract situation. And look, I'm a huge fan of Wilson Contreras, so this is nothing against him, but I think we're all in agreement that it's not maybe the best situation for even Wilson and Jordan Walker to have them both in this situation where you have Jordan Walker in right field and Wilson Contreras over at first base.
I think it's just a shame.
Why do you think that they didn't try Wilson Contreras in the outfield? Because remember when everything happened prior with them saying we're going to move on from him being a catcher after just 33 games, they had mentioned the outfield initially.
Yeah, they did. I think now they're catering to him. They're saying, well, we gave you the contract to catch and you aren't going to catch anymore. So we'll give you a choice. Do you want to play first or do you want to play the outfield? I really think they're catering to the $87.5 million and trying not to piss him off.
Yeah. And he's great offensively. That's not a question. I don't have a problem with him being in the lineup, but it's kind of this, when we're talking about that youth movement, you have these veteran players that are kind of locking up those positions where you can't create a clear, good path for these younger players who need to get that proper opportunity.
Okay. So we've figured out our ideal outfield. It's for me, ultimately, we're 2026, my outfield, and they're moving Jordan Walker. So with Jordan Walker in right, I'm going to have Scott in center, and I'm going to have Newton in left.
That's what I have, too.
Okay.
That's what I have.
I want to ask you about Quinn Matthews, who threw yesterday, threw a couple of innings, had 3 strikeouts, looked good. The stuff looks great. Brooke, last year in the minors, he threw 143 in the third innings at all four levels, low A, high A, double A, triple A. 143 in the third innings, 202 strikeouts, 49 walks, pitched to a 2.76 ERA. I don't know that there's an awful lot more that Quinn Matthews can do in the minors. By the way, at Memphis, he was not great, but it was the end of the season, and he's admitted, hey, September was not good. But I wonder how quickly into the season we reached the point with Matthews at the minors where they should say, he can't do any more at the minor league level. We need to have him up here.
Especially with how quickly he rose through the system last year. I mean, he just really breezed through the organization in the minor league system, honestly. And that's because he is 24 years old. So this isn't just like a high school kid, of course, that you have going through quickly through your minor league system that you worry about rushing. Because we do talk about that with prospects, especially in the Cardinals, of if we're rushing their timeline too much, just like we did with Jordan Walker and some of the other young guys. But with Quinn Matthews, he's 24. Stanford is basically like a minor league system in itself. So it fully prepares these players. I like Quinn Matthews a lot. I could see him maybe not necessarily starting with the team unless there's some injuries that come up. I don't know how you feel about that. I do want to see him in the starting rotation at some point, though, soon for the Cardinals.
When we get to May, I can guarantee you that I personally would rather see Matthews than Matz or Fetty.
Yeah, I would too. And that's why I think we talked about this yesterday, but Eric Fetty, him being a possibility that Derek Gould has talked about of maybe moving on from him, it makes a lot of sense because not only does that open the door for McGreevy, he did cite McGreevy in that article. It seems like maybe the pathway is McGreevy first, then Quinn Matthews. Is that what you're gathering from that?
Yeah. And I think McGreevy starts today, so he has a chance to start that process. But he was so good last year.
He was.
When he came up. So McGreevy does deserve that first opportunity. A couple of things about yesterday. The Blues just dominated the Kraken. I don't know that the Blues can play any better. I know that Seattle.
I don't think you can. 7-2.
Yeah, Seattle's bad, but the Blues absolutely dominated in that game.
Do you like the former Blues were the ones who scored
that was fun.
for the Kraken too?
Yeah.
A little throwback with Dunn and Shortsy.
Yeah. Bolduc had a couple of goals for the Blues. He was the number one star, 6 different goal scorers. The defense was great. So hopefully the Blues will have the opportunity to build upon that tomorrow night. We'll be watching that game, by the way. We'll talk about this later.
Thomas extending his point streak to 7 games.
Tommy.
Even though he doesn't like that?
We do. It's all that matters.
I think that's what matters too.
Yeah.
I'll never forget that, where we were like, so you like Bobby Tommy? And he said, no.
No. Yeah.
You know how hockey players are. They just kind of, no.
No.
I don't know what to think about it.
And college basketball, we had the post games for everything last night. We had 4 different games and 4 different post games here on Sports Hub STL. 14th ranked Mizzou clobbered South Carolina by 30, 101-71. And Mizzou moves into a 4th place tie in the SEC, the best conference in college basketball. And Matthew Rocchio texted me last night right after the game. He said they moved up to number 10, Mizzou did, in the Ken Pom rankings.
Wow. I mean, Mizzou has just been such a great story. Nobody was expecting this whatsoever for them to perform in this way. But I think that they have proven it at this point in the season, especially when you're getting ready for the SEC tournament, that this isn't just a fluke. I think a little bit early on, people were like, okay, well, college basketball, this won't be sustainable. But they have proven, especially with that win over Alabama and then that performance last night against South Carolina, which I know isn't a ranked team, but still, they are really just taking this energy into that final stretch run going into the SEC tournament.
Absolutely. And another college basketball game last night, and I've used this line already today. I'll use it on you. If you tuned out of the SLU game with 7 minutes left, you made a big mistake, huge, because they were down by 13 and you were allowed to check out, to quit, to give up. But SLU won the game. They were down by 13 with 6 minutes left, and they went on a 19-5 run to beat Davidson 57-56. Kareem Abdul-Jabbar was terrific down the stretch. He had 7 of those 19 points. Steph Blurry, you had to really enjoy.
Steph Blurry.
Yeah.
I like that one a lot.
Yeah.
That might be my favorite.
Good. SLU Alcindor.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Yeah.
Billikens and Mizzou. I mean, it feels like
Great.
they could do a little run into the NCAA tournament, maybe.
I could
especially
see that
Mizzou.
happening.
Yeah.
Yeah. Hey, Brooke, did you know what we have going tomorrow night?
Oh, we have that kickoff party.
We got a kickoff party. You need to join us at the kickoff party for Sports Hub STL. It's at the new Hot Shots on Lindbergh and Lee May, and you can meet the team, enjoy great food and drink specials. Party starts at 6 as the Blues game gets underway with Washington, and we'll watch the game, have great prize giveaways, and the Blues Hub post-game show will be broadcast live after the game. I think we just saw our buddy Jamal Mayers walk in. I think he's going to be is he going to be doing, Joe, the Blues postgame show tomorrow? We don't know yet. Two lucky Blues fans tomorrow night and a few of their friends are going to win the very first Sports Hub STL St. Louis sports experience, which includes watching a Blues road game at a private party with Blues alums, Sports Hub STL staff, and more. If you want a chance to win, come out to the Sports Hub STL kickoff party tomorrow night. That is Thursday night, the 27th, at the new Hot Shots on Lindbergh in Lime. Hot Shots, St. Louis home for all the games, all the time since 1990. Find yours at hotshotsnet.com.
Oh, the sandwich looks so good in that photo.
It's
it might just be
delicious.
like my pregnancy hunger, but I look at that sandwich and I'm like, I need that. And there's Brenden Schaeffer. Hey,
Hey,
Brenden,
Brenden.
how are you doing? Cardinals writer, and also he's a part of a lot of our shows. He does a lot of different post games, but also a part of the Cards Hub 365, which you can hear coming up here on our YouTube channel at 1 p.m. Brenden, how are you doing?
I am doing well. I'm back in Missouri, completed the long drive back home, and then slept most of the day yesterday. But I'm locked back in. I'm ready to get rolling.
Oh man, it has to be so tough going from the beauty of Jupiter, Florida, where it's all sunny, to it is sunny now here.
It is
So
nice,
you
yeah.
brought the
Good
sunshine
timing.
with you.
All part of the plan. Yeah, I didn't want to come back if it was going to be 3 degrees or whatever. I was gone for all that, but now it's mild. I'll take it.
Perfect. All right. Well, you probably heard our conversation that we are having a little bit ago, just about the ideal outfield. So we're not talking about opening day outfield because, as we've seen, especially last season, a lot of things can happen, especially injuries. So what do you think is the best ideal outfield for the Cardinals where they'll have the most success, especially defensively?
I think best case scenario, Newt Bar's in left. You let that competition play out between Ciani and Victor Scott. And if you're really going to take that to the next level, which of those two players has maybe more of a ceiling offensively? I think the perception is Victor Scott. I don't want to write off Ciani, but I think Victor is probably the answer there. And so ideally would be him just really asserting himself, being able to show he learned from last season in his cup of coffee in St. Louis and just taking that job and running with it and arguably having like the 2025 version of what Mason Wynn did last year. I think that would be, if we're talking ideal, that would be Victor Scott just grabbing that center field job and running with it. And then Jordan Walker getting to play every single day in right. And the only days he doesn't play in right are when he needs a break and they DH him. So he gets all the at-bats to be able to continue his growth and development there. That would be my outfield in an ideal world.
Brenden, one of the things that we have to remember, and I have to remind myself of this all the time, is what the Cardinals are wanting to do this year. And I keep saying, well, after the 7th inning, you take Walker out because you're trying to win the game. And I'm an idiot for saying it because really what they should do is get Jordan Walker all the defensive reps he can get. If winning, and they don't plan on winning this year, let's be realistic
They said they
about
were.
it. Well,
Depends who you ask.
They said their players are going to try to win, but let's be realistic here. Don't you think that Jordan Walker, like you said, give him the occasional day off, but if Jordan Walker starts the game, he should finish the game.
I think if he bats in the 8th inning, it's probably safe if you've got a one run lead to take him out. But if you're looking at him coming back up in the batting order again, then that's maybe where that conversation changes. Look, I think Ollie Marmol, though, is going to manage the individual games to win them. I think a lot of the conversation about development is probably going to happen going into the day with the lineup and the way you approach matchups, because historically, you can almost kind of guess if there's going to be a left-handed starter on the mound, there are going to be some certain guys that aren't going to be in that lineup from a let's win that day perspective, right? And you play the platoons. Could there be a little bit less of that this year? Maybe. And like that's going to be the push and pull, I think, with the front office, where those decisions have got to be made at a higher level. And the degree to which you're going to do that also is going to impact, okay, defensively, how do we want to look on a given day and develop guys on that side of the ball? I think all that's going to come into play. If he's got an at-bat, if Jordan Walker's very likely to come back up again, you probably don't necessarily pull him for a Michael Ciani off your bench to improve your outfield. But I think it would be 8th inning, 9th inning would maybe be the conversation there. Because as much as you do want to get him the reps defensively, I think 7 or 8 of the 9 innings is suitable for that day, because on that field, there are people who are going to be, and in that dugout too, trying to win those games, because we don't know what life is going to look like after 2025 with Chaim Bloom coming in and you've got managers, coaches, players, all kind of, fighting for their spot in the big league. So I think winning is going to matter on some level, just maybe not on the ownership and front office level, the way this team has been built. That's obviously not the top priority as much as it is developing these players.
So we're talking about our ideal outfield, but you were able to be down there in Florida and be around Ollie Marmol, who is the guy who's actually making the lineup. What was he saying about the outfield and how his outlook is on it and who he's kind of envisioning out there?
Yeah, I mean, the way that I'm reading Oliver Marmol at this point is similar to what I kind of predicted when I gave you guys my opening lineup. I think Siani, if you would have asked Ollie and gave him the true serum on day one of spring camp, who's your opening day center fielder, the true serum would have come out Michael Siani for sure. But does that mean that Victor Scott can't win the job? I don't know. I think he's got a wide open opportunity to do it, because even though Michael Siani is going to be gunning for that job as well, we can see the ways that Michael Siani could be a very valuable fourth outfielder, playing a bunch of games, just maybe not all 9 innings of every game. Whereas with Victor Scott, like, if he can continue the progress defensively, he can be as good as Siani defensively. We think both can be Gold Glove caliber players. Offensively, Victor's got that ceiling, though. It's just that we didn't really see it last year play out at the big league level. So if you were to come into this camp with the expectation of Siani kind of having the edge there, I don't think that would have been too surprising. And we know that Oliver Marmol really likes Michael Siani, and I think for good reason. What I don't get the sense is, and I could be wrong about this, but what I don't get the sense is really going to play out is a ton of Lars Nootbaar in center. I'm just not convinced that that's something the manager has a lot of interest in doing, but you can't rule it out, right? Because you know that if you go through spring and you don't have injuries like you normally do, then it comes time to say, well, how do we get Burleson in the lineup? How do we make sure that he's in there with Gorman and all the other guys that we want to prioritize? And maybe the answer does end up being playing Newt in center on some days, but I don't the top preference.
Brenden, I want to touch on a couple of young players, and I don't know how much of an opportunity you got a chance to see Bernal, the catcher, and the first-round draft choice of a couple of years ago, Chase Davis. Bernal only has 2 at-bats, and Davis has 3. One thing that I heard from people in the organization is that they kind of like Bernal better than Jimmy Crooks, who was their minor league player of the year. Did you see or hear anything about Bernal, first of all?
Not really anything on him other than he was out there on the backfields. I think he was maybe taking some at-bats against McGreevy. Might have been one day where they had all the catchers out there. Not a ton on him that would be really actionable from that perspective. Chase Davis, though, I mean, it feels like a pretty important year for him. A guy that when he was drafted, there was a lot of hype about the tools that he had, and then kind of took some time to get going in the minors. I feel like made some strides last year and came into camp as somebody that's really looking to make an impression. I don't know, what ETA you would set on his major league timeline, but certainly somebody who I think has like the post-hype sleeper. Like he had all the hype as a draft pick and then kind of fizzled a little bit to where people weren't sure, maybe made some changes to his game, and now he's in a spot where he can really kind of take people by storm.
I heard that, so as you said, Davis got off to a slow start, and he was approached and was told by a former major leaguer, hey, you have major league talent. You got to start acting like it. And it was more of a mental thing. He didn't realize what he wasn't doing. And once he realized and was convinced by somebody who had been to the show, hey, you can do this, it almost changed overnight, the way that he approached the game.
I think a lot of players could have benefit from that aha moment, right? And you don't always get to choose when it comes, but it can just be a tap on the shoulder like that for a young player. And sometimes it's something that doesn't really happen until a guy's already had some big league experience too. He might be able to get by on his raw talents and his abilities and just kind of going through the motions on a lot of the preparation stuff. And then you get to the big leagues and you see what big league level prep looks like. I think Ivan Herrera is maybe somebody who kind of had that moment at some point where 2022, Yadier Molina was still around. You had Ivan Herrera sort of kind of getting a cup of coffee, and it just, the prep side, the everything that goes into being a big leaguer, it's as though it kind of took him by surprise. And then a couple of years later, we're talking about Ivan Herrera now having made those strides and looking to really capitalize on it at the big league level. I think it's interesting for a guy like Chase Davis that, had all the talent in the world, but then has that tap on the shoulder come a little bit earlier. And now we'll get an opportunity in 25 to see whether he can take full advantage of it. I think that's something all young players need, but you don't always get to choose when it comes to you.
Looking at the young pitchers, we had Quinn Matthews yesterday, and he looked great out there on the mound. And then we'll see Michael McGreevy today. I'm trying to think about the pathway for those two to be able to be a part of the starting rotation. But as of right now, I mean, it's all set, the starting rotation, because you still have all those guys here. I'm curious about if there was any plans with Steven Matz, if you were able to talk to him, or even Ollie or whoever, about Steven Matz and the plan with him this season. Because I know last year they kind of held him back a little bit during spring training just so he could be fully healthy. I didn't know if that was also the plan with Matz this year too.
It seems like he's on more of a regular schedule this year. Oliver Marmol was asked that question and didn't indicate that it was going to be a redux of what they did with him last spring when he was maybe a little bit behind on the schedule. As far as role, though, it's not something that they would say at this point. I don't think if they had a trapdoor plan in the back of their minds to where if all the starters are healthy come the end of March and you've got guys like McGreevy and Quinn Matthews forcing the issue, could there be a world in which they have a willingness to move Steven Matz to the bullpen? Like, maybe it would be possible. I think if it were just to get McGreevy on the roster and in that rotation, and look, I think Matz's performance in spring is going to dictate that as well. I think that would be a lane to be able to do it. Would they do it if, let's say, there's an injury to somebody else and, okay, McGreevy's got a spot because of that injury, and then Quinn just keeps forcing the issue and you want to put him in there too? In that scenario, I would expect, no, they wouldn't rock the boat with Steven Matz. They would put Quinn Matthews in AAA. If he shows well in the early starts he gets, very quick opportunity in the season for him to debut. But yeah, I just think with Steven Matz, it's not something that they would necessarily broadcast or advertise, even if they were thinking about it. But we know that it's important to get a guy like Michael McGreevy into the rotation if he has the spring that dictates he deserves it. So that would be the one spot that I think is a little bit malleable and flexible when it comes to, could you put any of those guys in the pen? Maybe Matz would be the one, simply because we haven't seen him with the Cardinals ever have a year where he's thrown a bunch of innings and was super durable.
We talk about this, so McGreevy is sitting there probably as the number 6 guy. They asked Matthew Liberatore to prepare as a starting pitcher. How far down the line is he, though, in regards to the rotation? Is there any chance Matthew Liberatore gets starts for the 25 Cardinals?
There's a chance. And I mean, especially if he looks good in spring as they continue. I think for him, if he does it over an inning or 2 innings in a game down there in Florida, it's like, okay, we've seen Matthew Liberatore do that multiple times in his past. What happens when it's 4 innings, 5 innings, 6 innings? Can they stretch him out? And do they have enough opportunity with all the other pitchers that have to get innings to actually give an honest to goodness opportunity to Liberatore to make the rotation? I'm skeptical of that, and I honestly think he fits better when you shorten him up into a bullpen role. He can go along with Jojo Romero and be one of the weapon left-handers in the 7th, 8th inning area, rather than just kind of that middle relief bucket that he got thrown into last year. Like, long-term, if Libby can be a starter, I think it's better for the organization that has him, because starters are more valuable than relievers. At this point, though, unless he really just looks like a guy that has taken that and run with it, and maybe that is what forces some conversations about, shorter leash for a guy like Michaelis in his final year, shorter leash for Matz. Maybe you start talking about a trade conversation elsewhere. I just wonder, though, if Liberatore doesn't just end up in the bullpen, and the reason you bring him into camp as a starter is simply to cover your bases in case of an apocalyptic situation for a bunch of starters going down to injury.
Hey, Brenden, one more thing from me, and this is in regards just to the vibe down in Florida, because I think a lot of people wonder, why aren't we hearing from Chaim Bloom? And from what I understand, Chaim is kind of staying away from the media. What's it like down there with Mo being in his last year and Bloom? Does Bloom ever show his face? What's it like down there from a front office perspective?
Well, on the backfields, Chaim Bloom was walking around most days. You would see him there, but it wasn't like he was doing media availability. And in fairness, John Mozeliak isn't often doing media availability. It's not an everyday circumstance like it is with the manager, Ollie Marmol. It's when there's news, every once in a while, there'd be a John Mozeliak opportunity. But no, I mean, both those guys are walking around down there and taking it in. And Chaim Bloom, I believe, was at the game or two that I covered, and then obviously headed back to St. Louis in my case. But they're both there, and John Mozeliak is the same as it ever was in terms of him being that final decision maker, the guy that's the front facing portion of the front office. It'll be a legitimate change next year when Chaim Bloom takes over as the Pobo, because right now it's still Mo in every sense of the word. Behind the scenes, is there more interaction where Chaim Bloom is influencing decisions, is getting his opinion out there, and vice versa, and those conversations are constructive? I'm sure that's happening, but from a perspective of the way it is facing the public, we don't really see or hear from Chaim Bloom in that regard. And I think that's intentional by the Cardinals. They're giving him all the runway that he needs to be able to, kind of get his bearings, work on the things in the infrastructure area of the organization. And then next year, the plan would be for him to take over the role that Mo is in right now.
Brenden, welcome back. Good to have you with us. And we will see you. Are you going to be at the party tomorrow night?
I don't know for sure if I'm going to make it tomorrow night, but I will be there in spirit at a minimum and looking forward to everything we've got going with Sports Hub.
It's pretty amazing. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks, Brenden. And you can see him a little bit later coming up on Cards Hub 365.
Cards Hub 365, powered by Gray Bar, comes up today at 3 right here on Sports Hub STL. And Joe Roderick and Mike Claiborne are going to be live right here on the Sports Hub STL YouTube page after the Cardinals. Or is it those two? Is it Brenden, Joe and Brenden? What? Oh, okay, good. Yeah. So Joe and Brenden after the Cards take on the Yankees, the Junkies down in Tampa. And you can also get that show on demand from YouTube following the live broadcast, as well as on Apple, Spotify, or any other major podcast outlet. Cards Hub 365, daily Cardinals content right here on Sports Hub STL, powered by Gray Bar.
Ooh. All right, now it's time for the Grim Report. So yesterday we saw St. Louis native Max Scherzer, the brown and blue-eyed wonder, and in true Max Scherzer fashion, he doesn't like something new. We've heard him talk about in the past with the pitch clock, and now, as we know, they're testing out during the spring training at the major league level that ABS system, which it has some people feeling, kind of differently about it. I feel like I've heard more positive stuff, but Max Scherzer yesterday, he didn't really exactly like it, which, it was a good game for him. I don't know why he didn't like it. He is 40 years old, correct?
Correct, yes.
He is 40 years old. And so he's
crusty.
Yeah, he's old school. You think that's like a good way to characterize Max Scherzer?
A great way.
Yeah, I think so. Well, so yesterday there was 2 challenges that involved Max Scherzer that went against him. If you guys were watching the game, that challenge with Lars Nootbaar turning a called strike into a ball, and Scherzer unsuccessfully challenged a called ball later in the game too. And he said afterwards about the ABS system, because he was asked about it, he said, "We're going so far down the wormhole. Can we just play baseball? We're humans. Can we just be judged by humans? Do we really need to disrupt the game? I think humans are defined by humans." It's interesting because not many players I've seen be this opposed to the new ABS system. And it's really important to note that this is just a challenge system. So we're not going full robot umps just yet, but that could be the next step in this process. It's just interesting to hear Scherzer, kind of an old school guy, talk about the ABS system when, to me, I think that it is working out pretty well.
I think, though, that Max Scherzer probably has a familiarity with some umpires where without a challenge system, they'll give him that pitch two inches off the plate that he won't get from a challenge system. When you're a veteran and an umpire knows that you're throwing the ball where you want to throw it, and you start off on the inside part, and then you throw it on the outside corner, and then the next pitch is 2 inches off the plate, and they still give you that call. That's what you want as a veteran pitcher. That's why Glavine and Maddox, part of the reason they were fabulous, but part of the reason that Glavine and Maddox had so much success is because they reached a point where they earned the respect of the umpires, and the umpires knew exactly where they wanted to throw the pitch. So they gave them the benefit of the doubt. They said, oh, if that pitch is 2 inches outside, that's where he wanted it to go.
Yeah.
And a young pitcher might not get that call. Well, Scherzer is that guy now that's getting that call. And now somebody can challenge it and say, no, it was 2 inches outside. And he's saying to himself, well, yeah, that's exactly where I wanted to throw it. But it's not a strike.
Yeah. Well, with pitchers too, we know that they have their routines, and any little thing that they could perceive as being thrown off is maybe why they're opposed. That's why he was opposed to the pitch clock at first. But if anything, I think the pitch clock has been fantastic for the game and has sped up the game too. It's added, we've seen the numbers of more people are more willing to watch baseball, which is what you needed. So I don't have any issue with this challenge system, but it does kind of go into, are we about to go into robot umpires too? Because in tennis, if you watch professional tennis, this is kind of how things started for them too. A challenge system until it eventually took the full robot route. Is that something that we could see here happen in baseball?
Baseball people always talk, and Scherzer being one of them, they always talk about the human element. I don't know why somebody would be against getting it right, But that's what they are. We want the human element so that we can get it wrong more often. That's basically what they're telling us.
That's what. Well, do you need me to read this like quote from Scherzer again? Because it's so true. Because what Scherzer said is, we're going so far down the wormhole. We're not going that far down, Scherzer. Okay. Can we just play baseball? We're humans. Can we just be judged by humans? Do we really need to disrupt the game? I think humans are defined by humans, but especially in tennis, they learned that it's pretty much completely accurate. I mean, you're getting it right 100% of the time almost. And so I don't see anything wrong with that. We're talking about the pitcher side of this, but how much does it change things for the catchers too? Because pitch framing is obviously a big part of what catchers do. It's kind of a big art. It's what we were so spoiled with here in St. Louis with Yadier Molina, just the art of pitch framing. Now that doesn't seem like that would be a thing if you do go full robot umps.
Yeah. And again, I have no problem with that. Why should a catcher be able to fool an umpire into a strike? If it's a strike, it's a strike. If it's a ball, it's a ball. I think that's reasonable and fair. And hey, I know our police officers that are tuned in. What's the old line? 9 is fine, 10 you're mine.
Yeah.
Well, there's a little grace given right now to players because of the human element. To some players, they get an advantage. Why should Max Scherzer get any more of an advantage than Michael McGreevy gets? They're both Major League Baseball players. And
the younger players have been brought up through this with the system. They've been testing this out in the minors.
Yeah. So I think that, number one, it'll make the umpires more accountable because they'll concentrate more on getting that pitch right. And then at the end of the day, the strategy will be interesting because you only have 2 challenges in a game. So will somebody that maybe in the 5th inning knows that there's an egregious call, but they're going to say, but I know they've got a guy in their bullpen that can't throw the ball for a strike, and so I'm going to save it for him. I think the challenge strategy is going to be interesting to watch.
It is. So Tim, and make sure you weigh in on the chat if you like the ABS system or not, and also if you want robot umps. If you just want to go full robot, we're like having like Elon take over. He wants robots to take over too with humans. So we're going to have it happen with baseball too. Tim says, well, Max, Major League Baseball needs change or the game will continue to lose viewers. It's interesting. I don't know how viewership was last year for baseball, but I know with the pitch clock that we actually saw an uptick. Especially it's not just viewers. They really need to engage that younger audience, right?
And the 18 to 34 demographic TV viewership was up 10%.
That's huge.
It's monstrous.
Yeah.
And those people were going to more games. I think they bought 7% more tickets last year too. So their baseball's rules changes are having an effect on the popularity of the sport.
If you went to a game, I remember the first game that I went to after, like in person, like with the pitch clock instituted, I remember I got up and it felt like it was moving so much quicker. So even like that in-game experience, you could actually feel how much quicker the game was going.
I think
even if it was just, I think it shaved off on average, 22 to 30 minutes a game, which doesn't sound like a lot, but when you're there in person or actually watching, you notice it.
Oh, especially for the people that show up just to drink beer.
Yeah.
They're frustrated. They want to drink more.
Yeah. I went to go get like a chicken sandwich and it took a little bit. And then I came back. I was like, oh, wow, we're like sailing through this game, huh?
Was it the Shack Big Chicken?
It was. Yeah. So you have to wait a little bit longer because they're making that for you fresh more than half the time.
And the Asian food down the right field line. It's so delicious. It's great.
What do you
mean?
Really
have to wait a long time.
Oh,
it's noodles, like noodles.
Is it? Oh, I think I've seen that.
It's really good.
Yeah, that sounds really good. Yeah. George Williams says it's funny. It was funny that Max made a challenge yesterday and lost it. Yeah, he did.
Well, and Max is so emotional. And one of the things that Greg Amsinger told us, because he did a game a few years ago with the ABS system in the minors, and one of the teams that he was doing, because pitchers are so emotional, they wouldn't let the pitchers challenge. They would only let the hitter and the catcher make a challenge because pitchers, they think everything they throw is a strike. And then Max, not only did he lose, but he lost badly. The pitch wasn't even close.
Yeah. Here's a good one from Hockey Dad Don. If you can pull that one up, Joe. He said, can you imagine Game 7 of the World Series being ruined by a blown call? This can prevent that.
Or Game 6 of the World Series. Can you imagine that being ruined by a bad call?
Yeah. It has happened. Yeah. Also, Waterboy says, I like the ABS system because it is fast. Can we do that with reviews, like a safe call at first base? Maybe like having an unofficial fifth ump.
I love the idea. I think what they're doing is very smart. I don't love every idea that Major League Baseball implements. I'm not, I kind of like longer. I would prefer to keep the rules baseball rules when you have an extra inning game.
Yeah.
I'm not a big fan of the ghost runner. I can take.
I don't like the ghost runner, and I understand we were just talking about making the game quicker. That actually kind of contradicts what we were just talking about. It does make the game quicker. It just kind of feels like an unfair advantage.
Yeah. And Brooke, one of Uncle Randy's favorite memories as a kid was 1974, a 25 inning game in New York, and all of my friends. It was crazy because I came into school the next day, and the game wasn't on TV. It was a radio only game.
Yeah,
and every single kid at Craig's school had a transistor radio in their bed with them and listened to all 25 innings of the Cardinals-Mets game.
It's kind of like bragging rights.
Yeah. Bake McBride scoring on a wild throw to first base. It was great. It was fun. And I think we need to have more memories like that for young people.
I think so. Yeah. You used to see people sticking around all the way through the end.
Mm-hmm.
I think it kind of like brings everybody together, brings strangers together. I think it's kind of cool.
The game where Jose Oquendo pitched, I think it was like 19 innings against the Braves. And there was a relief pitcher named Rick Mailer for the Braves through 9 innings in relief. Mm-hmm. Very memorable. There was a lot of cool things about the game that Jose Oquendo pitched in 1988. But John Hewlett, still the PA announcer, was the PA announcer then. And the Cardinals had Tom Bernansky, and they had Jose De Leon playing the outfield. And when a left-handed hitter would come up who could pull the ball against Oquendo, they would have Bruno go to left or go to right. So a left-handed hitter, Bruno and right-handed hitter, Bruno and left. So De Leon and Bernansky would just run, if it was left-right lineup. And U-Man got to a point where he'd say, well, at the beginning, now playing left field for the Cardinals, Tom Bernansky. Now playing right field for the Cardinals, Jose De Leon. Next one, now playing right field for the Cardinals, Tom Bernansky. Now playing left field for the Cardinals, Jose De Leon. So this happens 3 or 4 times, and finally U-Man's going, De Leon to left, Bernansky to right. De Leon to right, Bernansky to left. It was great.
That's hilarious.
It was very fun. So that was Whitey using a pitcher in the outfield. But that's one of the great things about extra inning games. We had another one against the
craziness that you just see.
Yeah. Pitchers playing left field and stuff like that. It's great.
It is. So that was the Grim Report. And coming up, we will have Uncle Randy. So we're doing a little bit of a throwback, if you will, to the radio days where Uncle Randy will answer, not ask. He could ask you a question if you wanted, because sometimes we have to follow up with some of the questions asked, but you can submit a question on the chat. It could be anything, life advice. You heard me talk about the wedding earlier. Is it okay to propose to somebody at a wedding? These are things that you can ask Uncle Randy, even his favorite Girl Scout cookie. That's something you can ask him. But first, we have our newsletter to talk about.
We do, and we love the fact that you have already joined us here on YouTube, but we want you to get the full Sports Hub STL experience. So make sure you've subscribed to the YouTube page and like the video that you're watching right now. And if you haven't already, go to sportshubstl.com and sign up for the Hub newsletter. It's sent to your inbox twice a week and anytime St. Louis sports news breaks. The first edition is already out, and all subscribers are welcome to get that newsletter all the time. It's just the first of many subscriber-only benefits that you get when you sign up. Get signed up today, the Sports Hub STL newsletter. Subscribe at sportshubstl.com.
All right, so for Ask Uncle Randy, make sure you get your questions into the chat. And I already have one to kind of kick us off, Randy, while we let people submit some of their questions they have for you for Uncle Randy. Okay. So I just moved recently and, went through job loss, pregnancy, moving, I wanted to tackle like all the stressful situations in life.
Good. At one time,
because why not? We just need to knock it all out at once. But I moved, and the previous owners of the house, they actually left us a note, and the note was talking about neighbors and, just kind of, neighborhood stuff, all that. But then there was this one line in the note, Randy, and it was talking about the neighbors who live behind us. I don't think they're watching right now, but it was a warning. It was a warning. That was the only people they warned us about. And we even had our own trash man, Randy. He warned us about these neighbors too, that they always had issues with the people who lived in our house previously. They had 4 boys who lived in that house. And I guess it's an older couple that lives behind us. Mm-hmm. And there was just always a lot of back and forth with that. Mm-hmm. And they built a treehouse. So we have a treehouse in our backyard, and it's beautiful. But apparently that causes a lot of issues too, is that they didn't like that a treehouse was in the backyard. So my question is, how do you deal with neighbors that are potentially going to be combative? They're going to be, I have a feeling they're going to be those neighbors where there's going to be a lot of issues coming up. And I actually met her yesterday when I was walking, because it's beautiful outside. I was walking Stevie, my dog,
Stevie Nicks.
and I met her, and the first thing she said to me, because we have our flags in the yard for the invisible fence, and she's like, "Oh, you're the house with the invisible fence flags." She didn't even say like anything else, like about it was just already.
You don't
I could
know her
tell,
name or anything?
Like, yeah, I was just kind of like, I was like, "Oh, okay, this is weird." So, how do you deal with combative or even potentially combative neighbors?
I think the key is, well, there's two. Number one, kill them with kindness, which you're great at.
Yeah.
But I think the other thing is use the previous owner as a fall guy. If anybody ever complains about the treehouse, say, we didn't put the treehouse up. We aren't taking it down, but we didn't put it up. We've got a baby on the way, and we want to have that available for our kid. But always always blame somebody else. That's one of Uncle Randy's credos in life: is get yourself a fall guy. And so and that's the thing. If you've been warned by multiple people about one specific neighbor, everybody knows.
It seems like it just feels like there's eventually going to be something that happens.
Yeah,
what with all these warnings, it's like people are kind of telling us like, just wait, something's going to come up.
So, and I think if something does come up, like, oh, you mowed an inch of our lawn, say fine, just fine. We won't do it next time.
Have you ever dealt with a combative neighbor before?
I never have. I don't even know neighbors.
You've heard those horror stories.
Oh,
though,
yeah, I've heard
where people have really just bad neighborhood situations.
Yeah. I have never, fortunately, had a bad neighbor situation in my entire life. When I was a kid, I broke, because we would play baseball in the backyard, and I broke the neighbor's window by hitting a ball really hard. I mean, I drilled it, but smoked that, and the kids had a baby. The people had a baby, so they were upset that their kitchen window got broken. But what are you going to do? I didn't, So, but that was that was for my parents to deal with. That wasn't for me to deal with.
Yeah.
So
that's
as an adult, I've never really had a bad neighbor situation. But I can tell you that my philosophy would be just kill them with kindness and say, okay, won't happen again, and then just go about your life.
Yeah, I just hope that they're not going to be the people who are just always searching.
Maybe
for
they'll wind up being your best friend.
I don't know. If everybody's warning me about these people, then I'm a little scared. All right,
I wonder why that is. I wonder why people find it important to be bad neighbors.
I think it's just an entitlement thing. I think that it has to be like an entitlement thing of like a lot of people. We've talked about it with like grocery stores, or people who just plow through the aisle like they're the only ones in there who needs to get groceries or something. There's just a lot of people where it's like they just get so into their own bubble that they can't even think about other people. Yeah. Does that make sense?
Yep, absolutely. Yeah, you see it a lot.
Yeah. All right. We have a question from Waterboy. He said, Uncle Randy, how do you go about choosing a baby name?
Okay, this is interesting. I have a story for you. If you want an Uncle Randy story?
Yes.
So have you guys been to classes at the hospital yet where you have a bunch of parents?
Soon.
Okay.
Soon.
So I was in with those one time, and I remember it plainly. So this was before Patrick was born. And so they're going around the room asking each couple what your baby is going to be named. And there literally were 3 couples in a row that were going to name their little girls Cheyenne, Sierra, and Dakota. 3 in a row. And then, so this is along the wall that's opposite us. And then they come down the sidewall, and then they come back to us, and we're about in the middle. And they said, what are you going to name your name? And I said, we're going to name ours F-150.
After the car.
Those 3 named theirs after pickup trucks. I'm going to name mine after a pickup truck.
Did they give you like a confused look because they didn't realize?
Totally did. And then they figured it out, and their jaws dropped. And then I said, no, just kidding. Now, there are different ways to do the baby name. What I did was defer. Actually, so Patrick was born in 1994. And there was a bet that was welched on. So if the Knicks won the NBA title that year, Patrick Ewing was their star, it was to be Patrick. If the Rockets won the NBA title that year, it was supposed to be Hakeem.
Wow.
Yeah, the Rockets did win the championship, and for 30 years his name has still been Patrick. So my recommendation is, as long as it's within reasonable boundaries, to defer. But what'll happen is you both come. There's two great ways to do this. You can either workshop it, sit at the kitchen table, say, what do you think of this? 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 Or the other thing you can do is each secretly write down 10 names. And if you have any that match, go with that.
That makes a lot of sense. Just draw it out of a hat too. So then it's not always going back and forth.
Yeah, 2 that you agree on, right? So you both agree on what, 4 or 5, and then draw it out of a hat.
I noticed here in St. Louis that whenever Nolan Arenado signed with the Cardinals, there was an uptick in Nolan names and baby boy names. Did you notice that?
So yeah, and there are. When Curtis Joseph went into the Blues Hall of Fame a couple of weeks ago, I told his daughter, I said, you would be amazed, and his daughter's like 7 or 8 years old.
Yeah.
I said, you would be amazed at how many people in our town are named Curtis Joseph Grimsley or Curtis Joseph Karraker or Curtis Joseph Roderick, because he is such a beloved figure in this town. There's a lot of people, first name Curtis, middle name Joseph, and then last name. And he was so effusive in thanking me for telling his daughter that, because he was aware of it, but I don't think people really were his daughter. They live in Canada, so she didn't know. But there's from that era, so many Bretts, so many Brendens, because they were named after Blues players.
Yeah.
And so a heroic figure. A lot of dogs named Yachty and Oshie, by the way.
A lot.
But a heroic sports figure in town can absolutely get somebody named after him. Joseph?
I tried very, very hard to try to get my son Hudson named Frank Thomas Roderick.
See, there you go.
I failed, obviously, but I tried really hard for that. My parents tell the story. I have a sister. She's 3 years younger than me. Brooke, I don't know if you'll get this, but Randy, you would. I was told that if she was born, so her birthday is January 9th. The story my dad tells is that if she was born on January 1st, her name would have been Elvira. Because my parents saw the Oak Ridge Boys a lot on New Year's Eve over the years. So that would have been her name. Didn't happen either.
Oh, wow. That's great. I love it.
I was named after, so this also shows what era I was born in. I was named after Brooke Shields because my mom was obsessed with Brooke Shields. Just thought, obviously, she was the most beautiful, or is the most beautiful woman in the world, especially in the 90s at the height of her fame. She named me after Brooke Shields.
Huh.
Yeah.
You learn something new every day.
Yeah. We have another question here from Ollie. Uncle Randy, I grew up holding doors and waving thank you to fellow drivers. Is this a dead practice now?
It's not dead, but you can be like me and many others in helping bring it back. There is nothing wrong with courtesy. There is nothing wrong with chivalry. And I was pulling into Trader Joe's yesterday, and I had 2 people stop.
Any Trader Joe's parking lot is intense.
But they were in. So this is we worked over by this Trader Joe's.
Yeah.
And that westbound, when in the middle of the day, that westbound traffic on Olive and Creve Coeur can be brutal. And I had 2 people stop for me, and I actually had my moonroof open because it was such a nice day, and I out of the moonroof I waved at them. No, please keep doing that. Please don't stop holding doors for people, and doing the nice things on the road. We have become such a mean society, such an angry society. Every little bit of courtesy and nicety that we can provide is a good thing. We're too hung up on conflict. There's too many people emboldened by anger. So you do everything you can to be nice and make the world a better place. That's what Uncle Randy says.
That's true. Just because people I really do think a lot of it, we were talking about earlier, like, how do I avoid this possibly combative neighbor that people are warning me about? And I was saying that a lot of people, I think, are just really, it's the entitlement, right? Where you just feel like you're in your own bubble and you don't care what anybody else is going through whatsoever. I think that's part of it. I just think that a lot of people do have manners. I would like to assume a lot of us were raised with manners, but then you get so cynical because then you get out in public and not everybody else is doing those manners. So then you're like, well, if nobody else is doing it, then I'm not doing it. That's the part where you're saying that we need to stop, right? Is that don't let that take over your mentality of, well, nobody else is doing this, so I'm just going to go around and march around and like plow through the grocery store too, or not hold open doors for people anymore.
And this goes to if you're in a grocery store and Brooke Grimsley is next to you, and Brooke is pregnant, and Brooke is trying to reach up and get a can on the top shelf. Say, can I help you, ma'am? Or if it's a little old lady who's trying to get something off the shelf
Yeah.
and can't reach it. Can I help you, ma'am? Try to be nice to everybody. It takes 10 seconds and it'll make the world a better place.
That's all that it takes. It
Yeah.
really is. I really do think it's just people have gotten so cynical and they're mad when somebody doesn't do it for them in public. So then they just say, well, I'm not going to do it for anybody else anymore.
Right.
And then they just charge around. Another question, and this is just even another manners thing for me, but I've noticed that there's people now who don't even let you get off the elevator. So you're on the elevator first, and then the door opens, and they're already and they're standing in front of you, and they're already trying to come in before you can even get out.
Right.
Have you noticed that?
Yeah, it's interesting. And so, I think, again, 5 seconds.
It just said, just to say excuse, even saying excuse me goes a long way
Right.
with people.
Yeah.
Because just because you have a bad day or that somebody isn't exactly being kind to you when you came into a store or something, doesn't mean you have to continue that. You can break that cycle.
And sometimes, hey, we're all busy. A lot of us are, especially in a doctor's office. Okay, what's my doctor's suite number? So you're looking down at your phone and you don't realize.
Yeah.
But all you have to do is, if something like that occurs, say, excuse me. And the person in the elevator has the right of way. If you're on the outside, you don't have the right of way. So you always let somebody, this is a good Uncle Randy tidbit for you. You always, if you're outside the elevator, you always let the person inside the elevator out and then you go in.
Because it just makes sense. I don't know. I'm obviously going to the doctor's office a lot now,
Mhm.
so I'm having to use elevators a lot. And I just notice it about every single time that I go to the hospital. And it's not even a certain age range that's doing it. But all of a sudden I'm there. I'm already in the elevator. The doors open. That person's standing right there in front of me in the elevator. And they just come in. And I'm like, can I get out first?
I think we're all in a hurry. And I think, again, it's 5 seconds of being courteous. And it's just something that especially old people or pregnant people appreciate.
Yes. And old people and pregnant people.
Yeah,
That's the category.
Yeah, we do.
That's
So,
Ask Uncle Randy.
let me get to we have
we
one,
have one more? Okay.
I want to get to Josh
Yes.
Humphreys, who's asking, where does Burleson fit on this roster? And Burleson was great last year. And Burleson once led AAA in hitting.
Yeah.
He's a really good hitter. But where do I put him in this lineup, Brooke? Let me give you my lineup here. Where do I fit him in? I've got Winn at shortstop. I've got Newt Barr in left. I've got Contreras at first. I've got Gorman as my DH. I've got Arenado at third. I've got Walker in right. I've got Donovan and his defense at second. I've got one of the catchers, Pajes or Herrera, behind the plate. And then I've got either Scott or Ciani in center. So right now I've got Gorman as my DH. Where do I put Burleson?
I don't know. That's the thing. There's nowhere to put him. He's the odd man out in this situation.
Do you agree with that?
Cardinals. Yeah.
And Joe, I know that you're a big fan of Burleson. When I do that lineup, Winn, Newt Barr, Contreras, Gorman, Arenado, Walker, Donovan, Pajes, Ciani. Is there a guy? I guess you could put Newt in center, right, and put Burleson in left. That'd be the only option. What would you do?
I mean, my ideal lineup doesn't have Newt Barr. That's
okay.
I replaced Burleson with Newt Barr.
Oh, you have
On the bench.
Burleson in the
Yes,
outfield.
Burleson DHing.
Oh, okay.
Or just him and Contreras
And then-
going back and forth playing first or DHing.
Sure.
So who do you have in your outfield?
Donovan, either Ciani or Scott, or then Walker.
Walker.
Yeah.
Okay. So Newt.
I'm just not high on Newt. I'm not in.
Why are you not buying into Newt?
He hasn't been healthy.
Well, he has not, and
He
that's
hasn't.
what he's got.
But when he is healthy, though, he's an above average hitter.
And one thing, so we're a new show. We're only in our second
Yeah.
week. Brooke is the president and founder of the Nutty Neuters of Newt Nation fan club.
Yeah.
So we're kind of a Newt.
We're a little biased here.
He was great for Team Japan
He
at
was.
the World Baseball Classic.
Yep, yeah.
He stayed healthy.
If you only have to play 10
Right.
games, he's awesome.
So that's and I mean I agree.
But in all seriousness, no, though, when he is healthy, though, he is a good hitter.
Yeah.
He is an above average hitter. If you look at his metrics too, and with he is healthy, so I will continue with that caveat. He is also an above average outfielder.
Well, and he's a guy. If you are an analytics and a metrics person, he is an analytics and metrics star.
Darling, yes.
But he's got to play to allow those metrics to
Of
allow
course.
him to rise up to what he needs to be.
Yeah, and if the season starts or even as spring goes on, if Gorman doesn't hit, if the strikeout numbers are still there in the spring, maybe that makes your decision a little easier when it comes if Arenado is still here. So
I kind of take, and it's kind of weird. I don't know why, but I kind of take for granted that Gorman is going to bounce back. I don't know why I do. But I just think that Gorman is going to get back to being that. I hope he winds up being an 820 OPS, 30 home run guy. He was at 805 and 27 home runs 2 years ago. I hope, and he was at 31, still too high, 31% strikeout rate. Last year, 37% strikeout rate. But if he could get to 30, 35 homers, strikeout, and they don't care about strikeouts 30% of the time with an 820 OPS, I think that'd be awesome.
Right.
So,
and last year when they sent him down right before the All-Star break, it was, they kind of sent him down, I think, to save him from maybe setting that strikeout record.
Yeah,
I mean,
bad.
it was a confidence boost to send him down to AAA and get him to stop striking out. But if you look at what he's capable of, you look at the home run numbers before the All-Star break last year. That was one of my predictions, was that he was going to represent the Cardinals in the Derby last year. And he went on that run before he got sent down to where it looked like he was going to be top 8 in baseball with home runs. So you know what he's capable of if he puts the ball in play.
So I think it's interesting. I want to go back to Lars Nootbaar for a minute, because you're not alone in thinking this, especially when we're talking about him being kind of like, stat darling, I guess, and why the Cardinals would be so high on him, because you're right. I mean, the biggest thing here is that he needs to be healthy, but you had sent me this article that MLB.com did, and it's really interesting because StatCast, I love StatCast. I'm sure you've used that too, Joe, right? Where you can actually kind of see the players' numbers compared to the rest of the league, to if they're average, above average. And he really is on a lot of that stuff, especially if you look at his hard hit rate. I mean, that's the biggest thing right there. In 2024, a big one was his hard hit rate. It was a career high, like around 50%, ranked in the top 10% of major league hitters. So that's why I think that the Cardinals are high on him. It's not about, I think too many people get fixated on the Japan aspect of it, of him being an international superstar. Look, go get your bag, Lars. I don't blame you whatsoever for going to get your bag, because we see with Shohei Ohtani, that Japan advertising is huge. So I don't blame him for capitalizing on that success. But I think it's also almost kind of villainized him in a lot of fans' eyes, where people think, oh, they only like him, they're only putting him out there because he's an international superstar. That's not the case. If you actually look at his numbers, at the metrics, he has some really good numbers, especially that hard hit rate.
They also have done a lot to try to pump him up, monetize him here in St. Louis. You have the Newt Bar. And there have been many bobbleheads of Lars Nootbaar and other giveaways surrounding him, because they know how popular of a guy he is. He has all the personality in the world.
Harrison Bader. There was kids who would show up wearing the headbands. Remember when Harrison was doing that for a while?
And he had the Bruce Bolt batting gloves, and you want those guys to be marketable. We talk all the time about how baseball doesn't have those marketable guys outside of the few that are well known, but it's you look at star power in baseball, and it struggles compared to the NFL and the NBA. So you do want to try to pump those guys up, and then you hope that they end up being the stars and then perform on the field.
And by the way, from this statistical standpoint, he's kind of the anti-Gorman. His K rate last year was 19.5%. Gorman was 37.5%. So the strikeout percentage for Lars Nootbaar was nearly half of what Gorman's was.
Yeah. And the biggest thing is Lars would not, Lars has said this too. He's not excusing, the injuries. I mean, that is a big part of his game. It feels like Tyler O'Neill at time 2.0, where we have to talk about, well, when he's out there, he's able to do this for your team offensively and defensively. He does have to play a full season, and hopefully he's able to do that this year. I don't know if you guys have seen that. Maybe that's just me being chronically online, where I have seen some Cardinals fans really just pick at Lars because they just don't like maybe some of the fame that he's getting, and they think that that's taking precedent over maybe him actually playing.
Yeah, I think that's very well said. A good point.
Yeah.
One other YouTube chat from the Waterboy. Brooke is naming her child Newt.
I'm not. No,
Okay.
I hate to break it to you guys.
Like
I'm
it.
not. Yeah,
Okay.
I am having a boy, but it's not anywhere near any of the athletes' names.
Okay, good.
And nothing against any of them, but no, I don't have anything like that.
All right.
I don't think there's an athlete that I would name my son after personally, other than, well, I was trying to think about like athletes that like have inspired me. over the years that I really like, Steve McNair, but then my dad's name is Steve. So we're not doing that because of religious reasons. You don't name, in my husband's religion, you don't name them after a living person. So we couldn't do that. But Steve McNair's not living.
That's true.
So there's a loophole there.
You got that loophole going for us.
There's a loophole.
Yeah. Chuckle.
All right. Anyways, we have one more thing to talk about, and that is, what was it? What is the next one? I forgot. Where's the rundown? Wait, no, it's not post-game promo. What is it?
Well, yeah,
is it? No, it is post-game
every
promo.
game in St. Louis. Yeah, and it's not necessarily tonight because we don't have local games. But last night we had 4 post-game shows. We had the Mizzou game, and so after Mizzou had their rout of South Carolina, we had a post-game show. After the Blues had their rout of the Seattle Kraken, we had a post-game show. After the Billikens won their game, we had a post-game show. What was the other one we had? And we had 5 on Saturday. After every single St. Louis or Mizzou game, we have a post-game show right here on Sports Hub STL. Oh, and Cardinals yesterday. So we had all 4.
Yeah.
So we had 4 different post-game shows yesterday, and we'll have another post-game show after the Cardinals today. It's really cool. It's one of the cool things of many about Sports Hub STL, and we want you to be around and stop by and check us out on YouTube after every single game that is played in St. Louis.
Nice. And we have today's overarching item just to close out the show. So any last questions that you guys might have, make sure you get them on the chat. And while you're there, like and subscribe like Randy was talking about. I think important to note that you were just talking about with our coverage of the post-game shows is I think that's what sets apart what we're doing here and why we all bought into this is because this is instant reaction. So a lot of things that happened, like on Monday, whenever the Missouri betting broke that it was delayed, we were able to react to that instantly. And I think that's something that sets us apart and what we're able to do here on this platform compared to other things where we can get right to those instant reactions. If there's something that happens with Cardinals, like somebody gets injured, we can pull up and have an instant reaction to that where you can see it and share it on social media.
And just the other day when it was announced that Missouri was going to delay legalized gambling, we were on the podcast at that time and we had the instant reaction to it. And the cool thing about this is why you need to sign up for the newsletter and for notifications, because when a trade occurs, if Nolan Arenado is traded tonight, you'll get the notification and we'll be on the air right away to react to a trade like that.
Exactly. You get the Randy Karraker weighing in on that, the Mike Claiborne, we have like a full. Yeah, I think I'm way down on that list, but yeah, you're topsies on that list.
Yeah, and by the way, a great example. We've got the NHL trade deadline coming up a week from Friday.
Soon, yeah.
It's on the March 7th. It's at 2:00 in the afternoon, and we will have, whether the Blues make a move or not, we'll have reaction for you right here on Sports Hub STL, and hopefully. This is a big 5 games starting tomorrow with Washington, Brooke. But this
Washington,
it could determine whether I think the Blues will do one or two things. I think they'll either sell a player or two, and I'm not convinced about that, but I think they might, or I think they'll stand pat. I would be really surprised if the Blues would be buyers. I don't think they want to give up draft choices or young assets that they have.
No, that kind of goes against of what their whole plan is, right? Because you have those younger players coming up. I have seen some recent trade rumors too, where maybe the Shin brothers will reunite somewhere, where you have Luke Shin, who's with the Predators right now, and you have Brenden Schaeffer, obviously, with the Blues. It seems like from at least everything that's being reported that Army isn't opposed to kind of moving on from those veteran core guys. I think you're right. I think that Army, of course, is saying publicly, we know how he is. He's usually really candid, especially at the end of the season, of actually his thought process of what he was thinking during the season of moving these guys. But it seems like, he probably at a certain point in the season knew what to do with this team, if they were going to be buyers or sellers, or if this is even a playoff team.
And again, I don't think that they'll buy, but I don't know why. I know why, because Brenden Schaeffer is 34 and he's got 3 years left on his contract. But man, can you imagine what that team will look like if Brenden Schaeffer isn't? Just think of it from our perspective. We aren't in the room, but we see him on the ice. We see the leadership on the ice. Who leads this team and who follows somebody on this team that's not named Brenden Schaeffer?
They probably just won't have anybody with a C for a little bit for the rest of the season.
Yeah, even beyond letters, though, who's the leader?
I don't know.
See, that's
I have
question.
No idea because we're not in there.
Yeah,
but I mean, Brenden Schaeffer is the guy. I would assume.
I wonder if anybody wants. I think Robert Thomas wants to be.
I think he does.
And maybe he's deferential to Shen, and maybe he would blossom as leader if Shen isn't here. But I wonder going forward, if the Blues have that person, or if they would trade Brenden Schaeffer, if they'd have to do what they did when they traded for Ryan O'Reilly to have leadership. And leadership is a big thing in hockey. It's not as important in baseball, but I think having somebody over the grueling schedule that holds players accountable, I think it's a really important thing.
Would it just be Monty then? Jim Montgomery?
I think, yeah, that might be. By the way, the schedule coming up, Washington has the best record in the East, and they're only 1 point out of the best record in the whole league. That's who the Blues play tomorrow. Then the Blues play the Kings here, and the Kings, if the playoffs started today, would be a playoff team. Right now, they have 69 points, and they're in third in the West. Then, after the Kings game, you've got Dallas, and if the playoffs started today, Dallas has the second best record in the West. Right? And then you get the Kings again. Then you get the Ducks, who've been red hot lately and for a time passed up the Blues in the standings. Then you have the Kings again before you take on Pittsburgh. It's kind of strange to say, but your next easy mark might be the Penguins, who might be selling at the deadline. But the schedule coming up is brutal. And if the Blues can come out of these 10 points, if they can get 8 out of 10, which would be really, really difficult.
Yes, especially against those teams you list.
Then they're a team where you stand pat and you say, you know what, I think this team has a chance to be a playoff team. And that's all we're looking for, is the Blues getting a couple of home games in the playoffs. At the moment, by the way, because Calgary won last night, the Blues are behind Vancouver and Utah. They have 60 points and Calgary has 64. So the Blues are 4 points out of the second wild card spot in the West.
So we had some people kind of chime in about the captain conversation on the chat. G-Dog says, while Parayko is a captain, I wonder what that would look like. Now you have me thinking. Somebody earlier in that chat mentioned Colton Parayko as the captain. I think that Parayko is a leader on the team. There's a reason why he has the A, correct?
Absolutely. And when he came to the Blues, they, without even really knowing him, they went to the prospect camp and they made him the captain right away. And they've always liked him as a stand-up guy, a really nice guy. But I think I don't know if this is a problem based on what we said with Uncle Randy, but I think in this environment, I think he might be too nice to be.
It does go against everything we just said.
You know what I'm saying, though?
Yeah.
I don't
because you kind of need the captain needs, especially we saw in the past where there's been some issues in the locker room with kind of the younger guys versus the older guys. You had those younger guys get the contracts, Robert Thomas and Jordan Kyrou. And you knew that definitely caused some issues behind the scenes. You need somebody who can bring them all together. That's why Ryan O'Reilly is just so special. But Craig Berube also did a lot with that too. He made all those players put their egos aside, because it's so easy in a locker room, clubhouse, whatever it may be, for those guys to just separate into groups and then work against each other.
Yeah, right. It's easy to have that happen. And I love Colton Parayko. And you know what I think of him as a player, and everybody that's heard me for years, I think he's a lot better than a lot of you do. But I could see Ryan O'Reilly. I know Petro would go to players and say, hey, you got to pick it up.
Yes.
I know O'Reilly did that. And O'Reilly could do that because he was first guy on the ice, last guy off the ice. And he could go to a player and say, hey, you got to pick it up, or this is how it's done at the NHL level. I just don't know I honestly don't know if Colton Parayko would be the kind of guy that would go to somebody and say, hey, you got to pick it up.
Yeah, I can't even see him doing that.
No,
like he'd probably have like a smile on his
exactly.
face or something
he
like
would.
that. So you just need somebody who'd be like probably just really blunt.
Yeah,
is the best way to put it, but blunt in a way that it would be received well. And that's not an easy task whatsoever for somebody to be able to do that. I just think about it. It happens all the time, and I think that's something that happens that we've seen even recently with the Blues that I was referencing, where you just have the young guys coming in versus the old guys on the way out. Of like the new guys have their ways of doing things. The old guys, well, no, this is how we've done it for a long time. I think of what was the Cardinals situation with Jordan Hicks and Matheny, like on the
Bud Norris.
Yes, I forgot. Yes, that's a throwback. Bud Norris, where that's exactly what happened in the Cardinals clubhouse, where it turned into old school versus new school, and just erupted into kind of the ending towards Matheny's career as the Cardinals manager.
Yeah, and it's because Mike is old school. He appreciated
and so he
that.
sided with Bud Norris, and then Jordan was new school. Definitely is the best way to put it.
By the way, coming up next month at the end of March, it's going to be. I can give you the date here. I think it's March 28th. I'm going to get together with Mike Matheny. Who,
oh, really?
Yeah, it's
Nice.
an evening with Mike Matheny at the county library on Friday, March 28th. And it's Dad Coach. It's author of the Dad Coach. Mike has written a new book, and it's Friday, March 28th at 7. And I'll get you more information for that. But it's always, I always had I love Mike Matheny. I have a great relationship with Mike.
Yeah.
And I'm glad he's coming into town to talk about that. He's as fine a man as you'll ever meet.
And he went through a big health scare,
He
too.
did. Yeah. So we'll talk about that. So that's coming up Friday, March 28th. And so I'm thankful to Mike for shooting a text and get me involved.
Nice. And that's the end of our show.
Yeah. So
I close it out, I guess.
That's a good way. And we'll get Mike on here to promote that one.
That'd be nice.
During the course of March too.
He was always kind. I thought he was always super kind as a manager. I wasn't here to see him as a player, but
there's a leader. There's a leader.
Yes.
Yeah. When he was a player, that's a foxhole guy.
Oh yeah. 100%.
Yeah. You couldn't ask for anybody better than that.
Yeah.
So this has been a really good edition of the Randy Karraker Show with Brooke Grimsley. And it's not because Matthew's gone. Matthew's at a wedding in California, but Joe Roderick was spectacular. Round of applause to Joe. Thank you, brother. Brooke, did you have fun today?
I did.
And we thank you for joining us, for using the YouTube chat to play Ask Uncle Randy. We'll get that going every hump day here on the Randy Karraker Show on Sports Hub STL. We will see you tomorrow, but until then, have a happy hump day, St. Louis.